So I decided I wanted to do some sunset silhouette paintings. I don't know if there's an actual term for these things, but that's just kind of what I'm going to call them. I first kind of became aware that it was a thing about a year ago when I saw somebody selling a bunch of them at a craft fair, and I would be happy to credit them if I had any idea who they were. But a little while after that, I decided to try one for myself, and it was a neat little satisfying way to make a painting that was relatively quick and easy. So I think it would be fun to do a few more of them today. And maybe up the difficulty, we'll see. I bought some of these tiny canvases, canvas board, because I think they work better as something that's just kind of small and you can put a couple of them up on a wall somewhere. I do have one big canvas board. I don't know if we'll get to this, but it might be interesting to try with that too. But yeah, so let's just kind of jump into it, I guess. I really like doing these gradients because it's so satisfying. You just plop down a few drops of color and slowly blend it together. I do tend to end up using too much paint, but Anyway, the first one I just did the same sort of thing that I did in that one that I mentioned a minute ago. I was looking to ease myself back into this, but I realized this probably isn't the best way to do one of these because a single coat of paint just gets kind of streaky and you can kind of see through to the canvas in the back. Because of that, I decided on this second one that I would lay down a neutral base coat. I went with this gray-blue color, the thought here being that sunsets are sort of transitioning to night and I'm looking for some darker, dimmed colors. And if the shade shows through, it'll be fine. I do definitely think that this one was better, but I was wrong about being okay with having a dull color show through everywhere. But that's why we experiment. We find these things out, and we progress. So I did one more of these, and this time I sectioned off a few different tones in the base coat so that it would blend in a little bit better with the gradient of the top coat. Also, you may have noticed the lightest section is in the middle here and not the bottom like the other two. I decided that this one would be over water, so half of it is a reflection. After I did the first two, I remembered that there was actually one other time that I did a painting similar to this, and it was a silhouette of my dad fishing on some rocks. It's not quite the same thing that I'm going for here because I had a good bit of depth in those rocks, and I strictly want to do silhouettes this time, but still, same sort of concept. That painting in mind though, I just thought it would be fun to do something with water, and again, I think this one looks better than the last one, so we're making forward progress. So there's that little experiment done. I've got these three little sunset style things, which basically just means I have three little gradients. And you can see that it does kind of improve from, you get that white streaky bit to, it's a little bit darker than I want, but at least it doesn't look unfilled on the color. And then that pretty much matches what I wanted it to be. The light colors stay light, the darks stay deep. It is what I was going for. So with that out of the way, I'm going to start laying down some black and see if I can get some interesting shapes going on. Because just as the gradients, these are kind of boring, which is fair because it took like 10 minutes. I don't know why, but this one was really screaming rabbit to me, so that's what I did. Not much else to say about it, but I do want to mention something about artistic balance. I didn't want to have too much ground because it would just be solid black and boring, but just putting an animal on a little sliver of dirt wouldn't cover enough area, so that's why the rabbit is standing up. It takes up the most vertical space without being too much of just this thick black void. The plan for the second one was that I was going to do a water scene with the reflection of the sunset, and what could be better for that than a seagull sitting on a post? I don't care if it's a cliche, it works, and honestly this whole type of painting is kind of a cliche anyway. But yeah, I got the post in just high enough for the land in the background to go right through the body of the gull. The posts would have looked too tall or too short if I had avoided any of that overlap, and this way I'm not obstructing anything too important. I finished everything that I had planned, but it still felt a little bit too empty to me, so I decided to give this gull a friend or two flying by. I'm not actually sure how I feel about these looking back. I kind of wish I had made them further into the background, but it is what it is and I'm still pretty happy with this overall. On this last one, I wanted to get a little more practice with some of the tree branches because I think that works really well in this style. I didn't want to just do the same thing as my initial example though, so this one's going to get a squirrel instead of a bird. The only other thing I could think of that spends time in trees. Not that all of these need to have animals in them, I guess. I feel like I'm just kind of making up rules for this as I go. Anyway, I threw one more tree branch on the top, and we called this one done. Alright, so we got all three of these guys done, and... Can I... We cannot juggle them. That's good to know. I feel like whenever, now that I end up juggling so much, every time I pick up three of something, I have to constantly like fight this urge to just start throwing things. Anyway, I have all three of them done, as I said. And I'm going to treat these more of an experiment because, as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I was thinking about doing a really big one. And I think I am going to do this, and we're going to kind of mix elements from all three of these things. Going to have a tree, going to maybe have some water going on, we'll see. Whatever I can fit on this big old square. Don't feel like doing another base coat, so there we go. The first thing you'll notice here is that there's a big white spot, and I didn't bother painting anything there because that's all going to be black ground. My plan is to do a riverbank scene, or maybe like a side of a lake sort of thing. The specific body of water doesn't really matter, but that's why I have the colors reflecting back, but only on the one side. I tried to go with some deeper hues in this one as well, sort of like what the rabbit one had. I think that was the most aesthetically pleasing sunset that I did of the three. The last thing that I want to mention with the coloring is that I tried adding a much brighter strip right at the horizon line to make the horizon a bit more obvious. Wasn't planning on putting any land there like I did with the seagulls, so I wanted to make sure that the transition from water to sky wasn't too smooth. When it comes to the actual silhouette, the only thing that I really wanted to have on the shore was a tree, so I started off just laying in some bare branches, knowing that I was about to paint over them. I wanted to be able to just recklessly dab on a bunch of leaves and still have the idea of branches showing through after the fact. Believe it or not, this is actually the first time I've drawn a tree with leaves, so I was pretty happy with the way that this worked. The next part of the plan was to throw a rock somewhere in the water and then have a blue heron on it. I think he turned out pretty good, nothing too great. Anyway, he was looking as majestic as I wanted him to, and that was pretty much all that I had planned. But I was looking at the canvas and I had two issues with what I saw. The ground felt more like a cliff than a riverbank, so I tried adding a little bit of roundness to it to increase the depth of feel. I think it helped, I'm not entirely sure. I also felt like I could use a bush on the shore, so I threw that on there. The second issue was that the sky was feeling a bit too empty, so I just went with Old Reliable and stuck some birds up there. I don't think this was perfectly the vision that I had in my head, but I'm still pretty happy with the way that the painting turned out. So that's going to be it for today. Kind of a bit more of a simple concept, but I had fun doing it, so we're going to call that a win. I'll see everybody in the next video. Not quite sure what I'm doing yet. And I do want to comment on sort of upload schedule stuff for anyone who actually cares about that. I had been shooting for 3 weeks on everything. I think I'm going to slow myself down a little bit. This one was already a little bit late, but I've been barely keeping up with that, mostly just doing shorts, and I want to take time and do stuff that's a little bit more interesting and some of the bigger projects. So I think I'm going to be looking at more like once a month or so, and we'll just kind of see how that goes. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know if you like the video, if there's anything you might want to see me paint or whatever. I don't really know what my plan is, but yeah. I don't know what this is either. Goodbye.